When I spit bars in a rave, man, I go hard like Santan.
Ah, that's what I didn't do. Silly me. There we go. Hello and welcome to another Touchy Gooners podcast. My name is Lewis, and today I'm joined by a very special guest. We've got the Telegraph's Jeremy Wilson with us. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
No problem at all. I'm also joined by the rest of the gang who will probably be remaining silent for most of the first part, but they'll chime in. I've got Dan, I've got Shabs, I've got Seun, and I've got Leroy with me. So it's kind of like a packed Zoom room at the moment. But yeah, Jeremy, I'm keen to get into you because you're like Arsenal's first ever ITK. You're like one of the originals where, you were the go-to guy for all Arsenal news. And I'm just kind of interested in how you got into, because you're not an Arsenal fan, are you? You're a Southampton fan, I believe.
I am. No, I'm a Southampton fan. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so I'm just kind of interested in how you actually got into covering Arsenal and how you became like maybe the David Ornstein equivalent of Arsenal in 2008.
I don't know. I worked in Southampton before at a local newspaper, and then I was at the Guardian for a time, and then at the Telegraph doing London football, and then doing more across the south. But just an opportunity came up to we at that time, and still generally true, we tended to have one person focus on what were then the kind of four big clubs, which at that point was obviously Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester United and Liverpool. They tended to be the four, probably in terms of interest as well, in terms of a sort of web hits and the kind of fan base. They were probably the four big ones, and they tended to be the ones as well that, I mean, for a while that was the top four pretty much at quite a lot of seasons in a row from memory around that time. And then obviously Manchester City have come along, so slightly and Tottenham as well.
We don't mention them on our podcast.
Yeah, I suppose it's become more of a six now, isn't it, in the last few years? But at that time, so they kind of put one person on sort of reporting, covering those clubs most of the time. So I was keen to do. I had the choice between Chelsea and Arsenal at the time, and I was keen to do Arsenal. Chelsea were probably doing a bit better in the league, and actually Chelsea was a bit more where I'm still based a lot around the south. Chelsea is a bit more convenient to cover as well. But I wanted to do Arsenal because I was interested in Arsene Wenger and the sort of wider story of whether at that point you'd just been a few years into the stadium, slipped back a little bit. Manchester United, Chelsea were tending to win the league, and I was really interested in that sort of narrative of can you do it like he tried to do it? Can you go for the young? At that point, is building the Fabregas, Van Persie, Denilson. There was a lot of young players in the team. Bentner and trying to build Adebayor, trying to build this young team that could maybe take out Manchester United and Chelsea, who obviously had the much more established players in their team. That, you know, there's the sort of John Terry, Frank Lampard team, and United had sort of Rio Ferdinand, Ronaldo, Rooney, and I think Arsenal actually. So I was attracted to that, following that kind of narrative, and I think Wenger's really interesting anyway. So I thought, yeah, I'd like to cover Arsenal, and spent about 10 years, really to the end of Arsene Wenger's time covering them.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that you got the you got a quite changed and seasoned Arsene Wenger towards the end of his tenure, and I was just I was wondering what were the differences between Wenger when you first started covering Arsenal and then towards the latter, because to us obviously it seems like an obvious thing to say, he did age on the job, and it did seem like the job was really getting to him, and it was quite sad towards the end, just seeing him, deteriorate kind of.
At the start, when I first came in, he was still very much, this would have been, I did a bit of Arsenal in 2007 as well, and even 2006-07, but not sort of full on. So from 2000, and as I was coming in, it was still very much that time when Arsene was the kind of the great man, the Messiah, the kind of, and there was a reverence, even with some of the journalists as well, and definitely in how he was viewed. There wasn't that kind of Wenger out swell that happened in that period. There wasn't any of that. The people that became of the fans that I got to know, who did some of the fanzines or from the Arsenal Supporters Trust or the different fan groups. I'm thinking back to them. They were all still really Wenger's the king sort of thing at that point, and obviously a lot of people at different stages along that time kind of got to the view that he should go. So definitely at that point, he was still at the kind of back end of that. Everybody hung off his sort of every word, and he as his sort of stature was really high. But I was coming in at the point where it was starting to tail off, because it's still, although it'd been a few years since you'd won a trophy, and there was this narrative around can you do it with this young team, people were just beginning to lose faith. And then, as you say, it was almost like he was like a sort of, I think I wrote a thing, I don't know if it quite makes sense, like a rock in the sea that was just getting eroded getting bashed he was always still there.
Yeah.
It felt like every season he was a part of the landscape that was kind of immovable, but it was just, it got chipped away at every season. And it was I did find it quite sad sometimes, especially after some of those real big, because there were a few, although there were some ups as well, and there were moments where you thought, oh, maybe that. I remember that when you beat Barcelona in the first leg of the Champions League one year, and then I think you were in the League Cup final against Birmingham, and I really felt that was I thought you were closer than perhaps a lot of people thought to maybe doing the things, because you got to like a Champions League semi-final, you were playing Barcelona in the last 8, you got, you beat in the, okay, no one really thought you'd probably win the second leg, but you beat that Barcelona team, which was the best team anyone had seen. I didn't think you were a mile off at that point. So there were moments where he looked like he might get back to it, but overall it was that gradual chipping away, and he did. And after some of those real walloping defeats, there was a few, as you
don't remind me, Jeremy, please don't remind me. I still have nightmares.
You seem to, I mean, the funny thing with that time, you'd have those moments where there was some real bad ones, and then usually, in fairness, you'd then recover and win a few, and it would sort of settle down, and then there'd be like a 5-0 against Chelsea or something like that, and you'd be like, and you'd look at him, and I always remember that Birmingham League Cup final that you lost, and which I said, as I said, I thought was a real pivotal point. And he looked, after some of those real big defeats, he looked, when you were up, we had the sort of privilege of being up close sometimes, and he looked physically different. He looked grey, and he looked haunted by those straight after those games. Yeah. You couldn't help but feel for him sometimes. But then I'd say what was quite nice was a part at the end, after he announced that he was going, that last month, he kind of suddenly went back 5 years in time or 10. It's like the world had shifted, and you see him now, and he looks
radiant.
And it was like
rejuvenated.
You like that in the last month as well, of the after he'd made the announcement. That last month was really nice. Covering him, actually, he was much more chatty, because he'd gone a bit, in his shell, and a bit at times. I think he sort of felt everybody was out to get him a bit, and or had gone into that sort of siege feeling. And in the last month, he came back to the sort of much more. Although you'd have weeks where he was chatty and in a good mood and was very expansive, the last month he was fantastic, and that was quite nice that it was like that, even though he didn't quite sign off with the it's a shame about the Atletico Madrid semi-final, because that would have been great if he'd gone out with that.
Sure. Just going back to, obviously in 2008 was when you said, where we started to really tail off, and obviously there's so many theories as to why that was. One being mainly the move to the Emirates, which was obviously always used as like this kind of an excuse for Wenger a lot of the time for, he didn't have the funds available to him. The club was sieged with debt that didn't allow us to spend. How much credence do you give to that? And what what part of the blame does Wenger have to take, and how hampered and hamstrung was he actually?
I think he still did. I think it's difficult because it's all relative. He wasn't hamstrung compared to Southampton or West Ham or whatever. He was still one of the better. He was still one of the better wage bills and budgets. But compared to Manchester United and Chelsea, you were quite a long. And then obviously when Manchester City got taken over in 2008, he was very clearly the fourth biggest spender at that point. And then probably there was Liverpool were very similar to Arsenal, because I used to look at it quite a lot. So you kind of Arsenal, and at that point, Arsenal and Liverpool have roughly the same amount of money. You were sort of, some years Arsenal would have a bit more, some years Liverpool would have a bit more. But the other three, Manchester City, after they came, Chelsea and Manchester United, were, just factually did have quite a lot more money at that point than Arsenal. So Arsenal weren't paupers compared to the rest of the league, but they were. He was trying to win a league, certainly with a bit of an arm tied behind his back. Okay, you could say, well, Leicester proved it was possible, but I mean, that was pretty exceptional season. So I think what he was trying to do was would have been a massive accomplishment if he had done it. And I think he did his really good. I think he did still, on balance. It wasn't the heights that he'd hit before, but I think that period, I know that not everyone will agree, and absolutely fair enough, but I feel that period from 2008 to the last year or two wasn't. I don't think if you look at the spending and everything that happened, I don't think you can say it was a failure or it was bad. It was terrible. I don't think that doesn't really make sense to me. It wasn't as good as he had done before, and it wasn't what people hoped for. But if Mikel Arteta did that in the next 10 years, I think people would say, yeah, he's done a pretty good job there. Got top four pretty much every year, won the FA Cup a few times, got into the latter stage of I don't think people would be saying, oh, that's rubbish. And it got a bit like that with Wenger. I think it got a bit too polarised, and I didn't.
Nothing was ever good enough.
Yeah, I would defend his record from. It wasn't invincible and exceptional and the Messiah and all the rest of it, but I think he did a much better job than people gave him credit for in that period. I think where I think some of the criticism is probably most valid is you then had that period where there was a chance. That year Leicester won, and the year after it was a kind of transitional period for a lot of clubs, and you'd started to pay off most of the Emirates. You'd spent big on. For the first time, he was spending on transfer fees more than he was selling, if that makes sense. A lot of the years it was more or less flat, and the wage bill was quite decent, but the actual in and out was pretty flat. But then when you had that around the time when you had Ozil, Sanchez, that year Leicester won, and perhaps 1 year after that, I think there was an opportunity there to win. And I think actually you had that, as I said before, that year. There was obviously the year when Eduardo broke
2008,
was that? Close. Yeah, that was probably 2008, wasn't it? And then I think a few years later, maybe 2009, 10. I didn't think, although you tailed off really badly after the League Cup, I didn't think you were a mile off that Fabregas Van Persie team. So I don't think his work was. I thought he did a good job in that period, but he was the problem was you'd moved to the Emirates and Wenger himself had set it up that we want to become the best club in Europe. We want to, that was after what he'd done, we're going to the next level. So, by his own hopes and expectations, he didn't make it. So I can understand, and people were spending a lot of money on season tickets, but I still maintain, if you just looked at everybody's circumstances, he did a good job in that period. And then maybe a bit of a slight mischance in that season or two when Manchester City were kind of when Pellegrini was there, they weren't so good. Chelsea were chopping and changing. Ferguson had left Manchester United. There was a window of opportunity that didn't quite miss, but I never bought into them. I did find that period when everybody was sort of portraying Wenger as a sort of as an outright failure. I thought that was completely unfair, really. It wasn't what everybody had hoped for, but it wasn't the other either. I think it got a bit too to. But you know, that's football. That's how everybody treats football. That's life, really, isn't it? That people are very polarized.
One extreme to the other kind of thing. Yeah. It's. I think as an Arsenal fan, just looking back, I 100% agree with you in the fact that there were several missed opportunities where, you know, Arsenal really, you know, had the chance to push on or, you know, make some headway. But, you know, there was always this kind of feeling that Wenger was a bit of a diverer in the transfer window. You know, he was a bit gun shy. He didn't pull the trigger on targets that, you know, could really have been key to making that leap. And I was just wondering maybe if you had any insight into, like, for example, the Luis Suarez deal, very infamous now, but, you know, a signing like that really propels Arsenal when we desperately needed a striker. And I was just wondering, you know.
I think that's a fair point. And I think the one that gets me, there's a few that, because when I was saying, when I came in and I was saying that I didn't feel like you were a mile off with that. You had the basis with that young team with Fabregas, Van Persie. There were some good players in that team. There were more good players. Our Shabin was good for a year or two, wasn't he? Rosicky. There was a Walcott was doing okay at that point. You had a decent, you know, Clichy, Sanya. It wasn't a bad. It was a bad, but that was the frustration, really, what you say, because Suarez was a fair point, but Alonso, he nearly got to me, and you think what Alonso then did at Liverpool and Madrid, and then you think what you were missing, just that it was that one or two player, and that was infuriating, really, because you could. I don't know. I kind of say when I watch these, I sort of think, well, I can't know more than Arsene Wenger and all his scouts, but it was sort of seemed so obvious to everybody that one or two, you know, the right centre back and central midfielder added to Fabregas, Van Persie, you suddenly, we're there kind of thing, and it never, and they weren't always the most expensive, or they weren't impossible deals, and even Suarez now, what was that? Was it 30 million plus a pound?
40 million and a pound, I think.
Sorry, my memory's going. But that would have been a bargain if they'd have done 45 or 50 million, wouldn't it? In terms of then how good he was. So definitely didn't back himself. And I think, I do think that when he did get the money, a bit more money, it wasn't Manchester City money, but it was more than he'd been working on for a few years. The Ozil and Sanchez signings, they looked like they might do it, but they just weren't quite the right people. Suarez would have been more the right person, and I think Higuain might have been a better bet in hindsight than Ozil. At the time, it felt like Ozil, but I think what Arsenal needed was a player that where he had the money to buy sort of out of the A bracket, which Ozil and Sanchez were pretty close to that. Maybe not the absolute A bracket, but the net pretty good. So he had the money to, say, pick two people of that sort, and I think he needed, as well as the player, he needed the personality with it, and I think that sort of that would a real like nasty winner, not nasty, but a real winner. And I think, you know, that like you had when you had Vieira in the team, and like Suarez might have given you just something with a bit of, and because Ozil, as lovely player as he is, Ozil's not going to pick up a team by the scruff of its neck and make it better. He'll make a good team. He's like he's the oil, and he'll make a good team maybe a bit better, but he's not going to be the driving force to pick up a team that's not quite there, and so I think and then Sanchez was in the end where he got a bit sulky, and all the rest of it was a bit the same, and I just sort of felt like the selection of those two, if you had 30-40 million at that point, just didn't quite come off, which was a shame.
Yeah. Lads, I'll open the forum to you guys. If you've got any questions to put towards Jeremy before he shoots off, does Dan, do you want to start?
Yeah, I do have a question. I'm particularly interested in finding out the process of where, if you get a story, how do you source it? How many people do you have corroborating the story? Do you have to run it by a certain person? So just the whole process of doing a story on Arsenal, maybe even a story that the club might not like. Like, what is the process here?
Yeah, it's the same really with covering any story. It's quite rare. I mean, you would have you have sort of people that you would probably speak to on a regular basis, whether it might be an agent around a player, an employee at the club, could be someone quite senior, could be someone who works at the training ground, could be a family member of a player, whatever. And there's not really this is a sort of archetype. This is a contact. You know, it could be anyone really that has a bit of insight. It literally can be any, or a player themselves, or anything that any sort of range of what I've described. And then really you try and speak to people, and you would run things by the club. I mean, there's a sort of press office, and if there was a sort of major story that you wanted to check, then you'd certainly run it by them. And I suppose in journalism there's often a bit of a giveaway code with things, because usually if you're writing something they don't want you to write, and you, for whatever reason, you've been given bad information, they'll normally deny it quite quickly. Usually if they don't comment, then
some credence to it.
Yeah, it's not a guarantee. Obviously you have to, so you kind of, and obviously as you get to know people, you get to know who's reliable and who you can trust, and that is a bit of a judgment call. So there's not really a typical contact as such. It really can be anybody, but you'd always there's a lot, maybe some people just write any old thing, but honestly the good people who cover Arsenal, they check out their stories. You mentioned David Ornstein, John Cross. I know he sometimes, like, we all get a bit of stick on social media or whatever, but he is an excellent reporter of Arsenal. He might, if I lost you there.
No, you're still here.
Yeah, he people like that, and David Ornstein as well, Sammy Mockbell, Sam Dean covering Arsenal for us now. There's lots of they check out their stories. They don't. We're not perfect. We might sometimes get something not quite right. I suppose.
This is where my follow-up question would come from. Basically, just to kind of find out. So a lot of Arsenal fans kind of attribute our bad transfer dealings with even Ivan Gazidis and his relationship with Arsene Wenger. So and also some of the rumours coming out. So of course there this famous quote of Gazidis saying, in a few years' time we'll be one of the best in Europe. We'll be competing with the likes of Bayern Munich and Barcelona. So kind of finding out how do the senior team Arsenal, how do they communicate with the media? What's the relationship? Just to kind of get some insight here.
Yeah, it's really there isn't a kind of set answer to that. So generally, in terms of if you're quite new to covering Arsenal, you go to the press conferences. If you had something to put to someone, you'd speak to someone in the they've got a sort of 4 or 5 people that you might go to who do various things in the press department, and you'd go through them. But then as time develops, you go to events, you go to things, you might get the chief executive might do a briefing and or you might be at a European game and have a coffee one morning. And so like relationships develop and form. And so a chief executive might speak privately sometimes to a journalist that he knows, and that would be the same at any club. Or it might be a chief executive who doesn't like speaking to anybody, or they only like to speak on the record, so that everything they're saying is sort of attributable. Or some people like to speak off the record the whole time and are quite want to get out there, want to get their side out there, but don't want to be named. Some people don't want to sort of get near the media with a barge pole and just leave it all to the press office, and they will just very occasionally appear before a big announcement or something like that. So it's hard to say that there's a set formula. I mean, I think Gazidis didn't do masses with the media, but he'd do maybe a couple of times a year. We would go and see him. So I suppose I got to know him a bit through just the fact that I would be the one who'd generally turn up at things, and then you just naturally get to know someone a little bit. But I don't think he was someone that played any sort of media game at all. He's pretty straightforward, really, what he did. And I don't know Rao Sanlehi and Vinay because, as I say, I've not been covering it day to day, but I think they've come and introduced themselves to the media. I don't think they do a whole lot of stuff. I don't get the impression Arsenal is a particularly, some clubs are a bit more leaky and brief stuff and favourite journalists. I don't think that happens a huge amount at Arsenal, but that does happen in football and journalism, and it's just like sort of human nature, really, that you get relationships with people, and that you obviously, as a journalist, you try and develop them, but you're only going to develop long-term relationships with people if you are trustworthy, and they feel like you're fair and you don't sort of break their trust on things. So which is the same as any relationship with any person you meet, really. They're with you a bit more as they trust you more.
Just going back to your first point, though, I feel like the standard that you guys are held to by the general public is absolutely bananas. It's like if you get one thing wrong, it really gripes me, because it doesn't mean your information is wrong. It doesn't mean your information is wrong just because Arsenal do not go and sign, X, Y, Z. It must be frustrating for you.
You have to have a bit of a thick skin on social media. Actually, sometimes it's quite useful, because we've made, you do stupid, like anybody, occasionally doing 3 or 4 stories a day, you're busy, whatever, you're tired, and you make a little mistake about so-and-so signed in this year, or has got a 2-year contract and he's got 3 years left, or whatever. And social media is a great, you're right though, people read it, people pick up everything, so it's a great corrector if you do a silly mistake. So I've had that before, where oh Christ, whatever, I said that he was signed for 10 million and it was 15 or whatever, and I check, and and I have changed 1 or 2 things when I've seen that. But in terms of the transfer stuff, it is difficult, because if you say a club's interested in somebody, then that's usually sort of taken as they're going to sign them, and if they don't sign them, it's kind of your fault or whatever. So it's you do get that. The one that I always used to get was I still get it sometimes if I mention it, was about the transfer war chest, because we used to do a sort of, we used to try and figure out what Arsenal had to spend, and we were pretty good at it, because it wasn't really that difficult, because they published,
it wasn't that much.
It wasn't that much. They publish accounts, so you can kind of work it out. That they're going to keep X amount of money to pay the stadium, and I think there's a certain amount of security against the stadium. So you can basically work it out, really, once you spoke to a few, and then you might put it on and say, I reckon it's about 50 million this summer, or 40 million, and that someone might say to you, oh, that's a load of rubbish, we've not got anything like that, it's probably more like 40, or they're not, but they normally go, yeah, that's about right. So you're right, Arsene Wenger's got a transfer budget of 40 million, and then of course you'd never spend it, and then you get you get the blame for that, or he would. There's one year spent more, and they I think they must have sold a few players or something like that. But that always used to wind everybody up, because I think if you said they had a certain amount of money, you'd almost get the blame if they did, if
they went a pound over or a pound under. Lads, do you have any more questions before we have to let Jeremy go?
I've got one more. So just generally, sorry, what over covering your time in covering Arsenal, what was your favourite Arsenal memory? Something from like behind the scenes that we might not have been privy to.
Oh, that's a brilliant question, because there was loads of them with Arsene Wenger, actually, because you do get that. I mean, the story connected to Arsenal that I enjoyed doing the most was there was 2 really. I suppose I managed to get an interview with Stan Kroenke, where I went to Denver and got into his box at the. It was actually, it's in St. Louis, it is NFL. So that was from a sort of journalistic point of view, because he hadn't really talked much at that point. That was good. But probably the thing I most enjoyed was going, when it was Arsene Wenger's 20 years at the club, we were saying, what should we do? What could we do that's a bit different? Everything's sort of been, pretty much, we've done most angles on him. And I was like, well, why don't we, one thing we hadn't really seen anyone do it. And we do this quite a lot now. And you see it in like, other newspapers as well, and media do this quite a lot, where you go to like the hometown of somebody and you just go and see who's try and meet a few friends and whatever. So I went to Arsene Wenger's village where he grew up in. It was on the quite close to the border between France and Germany. This sort of quite small village. And I was thinking, and someone told me before I went that he had a brother that still had never left the village and still lived down the road from where they grew up. So I was thinking, so obviously I'm thinking to myself, sort of, look, nobody's really interviewed this brother before. It'd be great to speak to Arsene's brother. So so I thought, do I tell the club that I'm going to try and to the village? And I thought, if I sort of make a big thing of it, it might sort of spook people a little bit, and I was sort of thinking, maybe it's not the best thing to make a thing of it. I'll just go and see what happens. So I went and chatted to someone at the football club, and they went to school with Arsene, and then it was such a small village. It's like, oh yeah, that's where his parents lived, and oh yeah, his brother lives. Do you want his brother's number? And I was sort of like, oh, because it was that type of place, and the football club was where Arsene started football. His dad had previously, I think, been the president or the chairman of the football club, and had got their sort of artificial pitch built, or got the clubhouse built. It was quite small. It was only a village of probably about 4,000. So I thought, okay, so obviously that when they said, oh yeah, you know, do you want me to call Arsene's brother? So I was like, yeah, go for it. So they called him, and he was they said he's going to speak to Arsene, and he's going to phone back in an hour. So at that point I thought, what are my sort of odds now? And I wouldn't pretend that Wenger knew me personally, but he'd know my face and he'd know my name, sort of thing, probably.
You're too modest. I know you guys know each other on first name basis.
So I thought at this point it's probably better if his brother is going to phone him up and say some English journalist has rocked up. You know, I thought it's better that he knows it's me than he doesn't know who it is, probably, because it's someone, at least he knows it's someone who, it's not sort of someone who's kind of digging around his private life or anything like that. He just wants to do a piece about them growing up together in the village. So I phoned up the club and said, oh, by the way, just so you know, I'm in Arsene's village today, and in case, because another friend as well had texted him. So I thought, they were that close of friends that you were sort of just running into. So I thought better that he knows who it is, because I don't think he'd be that worried if he kind of knew that it was, he would know what purpose we had for doing it. So anyway, he came. We called back, and he was fine about us coming in, and he said, yeah, come round. And he had all the photographs of Arsene when he was sort of 8 and 12 and all these, and and told me all about their childhood growing up together in this village. So that was really nice, because it was from a journalistic point of view, I suppose it's quite good because you got something different, but also it was just really nice to kind of learn more about, find out more about him and about how it was quite an interesting story about his family in the war and everything like this. So it was and how he's very studious, very interested in other countries. When he was young, a lot of people just stayed in the village, but he was always wanting to do other things and to know about other countries. And he'd obviously obsessed with football. He used to listen to he's told this story himself, but his brother told it as well, that their parents run the pub in the village, and he would stay up listening to all the kind of village team talking about football when he was a little boy. And so it was really, 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 really rewarding to go and do that story.
Lovely. Guys, any other things before we let Jeremy go? Because
yeah, I've got just
a quick one, Shabs.
You were talking earlier, Jeremy, about the League Cup final against Birmingham being quite a decisive moment were you felt things went like that. That was kind of it. It was like a pivotal time. Do you feel that there were any decisive moments off field where you felt maybe Arsene Wenger had lost his way a little bit, or maybe couldn't put it back, or were quite key in terms of changing us from being that title challenging side to a side that seemingly were content to finish in the top four?
Yeah, I think that's some my because everything blurs into a season a bit, but I think it was that following summer or the next summer so there was the summer when Fabregas said he wanted to leave, but then he was sort of persuaded to stay for a year, as I remember it. And then the the Nasri and Clichy was it in the same summer. But I remember we were in he was in Malaysia for that summer, and we hadn't seen Arsene for many months, and there were all this sort of what's going to happen. And I think Fabregas didn't come on the tour, and I need to get my memory straight because I know that it was over 2 summers some of this happened. But basically, Wenger said you can't be a big club and sell both players in the summer. So a quote to that effect. And it was Nasri and
it was Fabregas and Nasri that same summer, Jeremy.
And
Yeah,
then
but they
Van
both
Persie went the following summer. And
Yeah.
Van Persie, and that was right. So we were in Malaysia. They got off the plane, and we had an audience with Arsene and then Van Persie. And Arsene was I thought he was really strong. He was like, you can't be a big club if you sell both of them. It's not going to happen. And Van Persie then came in, and Van Persie could be quite straight talking as well. And he was like, pretty sure that he didn't want Fabregas to leave.
Yeah.
And then when those situations, obviously just, up until then, you always felt that Arsene Wenger was in control of that quite young emerging dressing room, and that they were going to stay with him. And at that point, you realised they weren't going to stay with him, which was quite sad in a way. Whether it was money, whether it was ambition, perhaps a combination of both, they felt like they weren't going to win. And that was the sort of moment where you thought, well, and I think it was quite symbolic once Fabregas wanted to go, because he embodied that team really, that youth policy and everything like that. So I think that was the sort of off-field thing, and then Wenger lost a little bit of faith that summer as well, just having said I'm not going to lose both of them, and then the kind of reality of what you would lose if you ran them into their contracts and whatever, and just the reality that they weren't going to sign kind of hit home. And then obviously the same thing happened with Van Persie as well, when he had to sell him to Manchester United. But I think it was that summer when you saw really that team was disbanded, and he actually did. He was quite resilient to go, I thought, Wenger, to rebuild again, because there was a period there where you didn't have a great team. And I remember that weird summer when you had kind of like all those players turned up on the last day: Santos, Mertesacker,
that must have been fun to cover.
Yeah, how you got to that season? Really, I never was pretty. Weird. I think that was the year Van Persie sort of carried the team, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He did quite well to kind of from the Van Persie Fabregas Nasri team disbanding to then get to another team that was half decent and won 3 FA Cups. I think he did quite well because that was so disappointing for him. I think he invested everything in those young players, and at that point he did turn down Real Madrid. He could have for himself, and he was sort of trying to show them, I'm going to stay, and they didn't. And you can understand it from their point of view, and Wenger's he would understand it from their point of view as well. He's not sort of bitter about it, I don't think, but yeah, you just felt at that point it's not going to happen. It's not that sort of quite romantic story wasn't gonna happen.
No.
So that was key that summer. But I think that was off the back of the Birmingham game, really. That everything sort of a lot flowed from that.
Yeah. Jeremy, thank you so much for your time. You've been a star. I really appreciate you coming on, and I hope you've had fun as much as we have as well.
Yeah, no, pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Jeremy.
All right, cheers, guys. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
So lads, obviously that was great for Jeremy to come on and share some time with us. What did you guys take from that section that most stood out to you?
For me, man, we really missed a trip, man. it just feels like that Project Youth team, yeah, it was nearly there. It was actually nearly there, and we could have actually gone and done something. We just need a little bit more courage and a little bit more investment at the right time. And if we just had David Dean to push him over the edge, I feel like he could have done it. But after that, we kind of, once we lost our way, after that 2011 season, we kind of lost it. So it's just a bit sad at the same time, but I still remember Wenger quite fondly. Like, he's still a great uncle to me. But, you know, it's just sad.
Yeah, I agree with Leroy as well, because I remember, because I don't know if there was an interview with Fabregas as well, basically where he was saying that season, the 10-11 season, he was begging for us to sign Alonso. And you remember as well, Alonso Bear wanted to come and compete in it, like Jeremy said just previously. It really wasn't that much, do you know what I mean? So imagine we had Alonso in that team, like next to Wilshere, for example, that season as well, and then maybe just another centre-back to play alongside Cos. And it was one of those things, like you hear that rhetoric where Arsenal were only 1-2 players away from like winning, but generally that team was about 1-2 players away from winning. Like if you had another centre-back and a good centre-mid, I think we were there, man. We were there. So it's a real shame. And yeah, for me, after that 10-11 season, I do think Wenger lost his way, and I think things were never. Even though obviously we'd won a couple of FA Cups in seasons prior, we haven't had a team anywhere near as good as that 10-11 team since, and that's, and we're talking over a decade ago. So, and we've got a long way to build to get even anywhere near back to that level. So yeah.
Yeah. Again, I'm gonna just say I agree with you both, and I think the thing that stood out for me as well, what Jeremy was saying, was less so about the player, more about the personality, and that's something that that resonated with me, because that's something that I always felt. We were a type of player away from the dressing room, and I think maybe Xabi Alonso didn't represent that bite in a player, but I think he as well as his technical quality, he would have brought a degree of professionalism and the winning mentality to our dressing room as well. I think he would have. I think he would have just brought that there behind the scenes as well. And so I think definitely a personality type or two was missing, man. But it does feel like, yeah, man, we were always so close yet so far.
What did you guys? Sorry, go on, Dan.
Yeah, just to butt in there, I think for me it became very clear that that Wenger was really very much an idealist, and I think Jeremy said it right, that everyone said it was so obvious that 1 or 2 players were really just the missing pieces, and I think Wenger was just trying to go against the grain.
Yeah.
And similar with the signings that he then said. So he bought Ozil and Sanchez, but he could have bought Suarez. Maybe that Suarez deal wasn't even going to happen anyway. But Higuain, we really needed a striker. He could have bought Higuain and a different creative player or a different winger. I think Wenger was very much an idealist, and that was in the end his downfall. I think he was pretty much going against the grain. But one thing I will always admire Wenger for is his bounce back abilities. I think it's something I've never seen before in football management, to be honest. Because if you describe that summer, we were basically finished. Losing Nasri and Fabregas in one summer, he somehow managed to have quite a good transfer. We get Mertesacker was very good serving for us. Ateta was very good serving for us. And that team, even though that team wasn't as good as the team that Jeremy has described, which was on the brink of maybe continued success if we made the right signings, that team still ended up being successful, had a successful period under him. And there were so many times where we, as an Arsenal fan, thought, "Now we are done, we are finished. We're not getting top 4. We're not going to do this." And then somehow he turned that around. So I will always admire his resilience and his bounce back ability. And of course, he brought all of us great memories. So it was good talking and listening to Jeremy about him.
What did you guys think? So I think Jeremy was kind of like, you could tell he had a lot of admiration for Wenger. And
Wenger invited him for wine a couple of times.
You could tell, and he was being modest about the fact that his relationship with Wenger. But he kind of said that he felt like Wenger got harshly criticized, I guess, over his overall performance during the Emirates era. I know you guys probably gonna have different feelings towards that. How do you guys feel that Wenger's performance, say post post Highbury, so Emirates era. Do you feel like Wenger is harshly criticised during that period, or do you think that the criticism is just?
Go on, Leroy. You go first. No, is Leroy there? Oh, okay. I'll go.
Go on, Sean.
Yeah. No, I was. I think the criticisms were definitely justified. At certain times they were definitely over the top, but I think the frustration partly was because of what we were and where we were. We were at the top when we sort of moved to Highbury, and then it kind of felt like the decline started to. Not that it happened too quickly, but it felt like we didn't help ourselves at times with certain decisions we made, certain decisions around the squad. Like if you think back to 06 when, and this always pains a lot of Arsenal fans, Ashley Cole went to Chelsea. That should have never happened. I was even watching that Vieira and Roy Keane documentary. Vieira was like, when he left, he was like, he thought Ashley Cole was going to be the captain of Arsenal for the next decade. You know what I mean? So there were just decisions that were made sort of every summer, every season. That just felt like it hampered us as well. And obviously from what we were quite an all-powering, very athletic team. To obviously, we still had, obviously we were still technical at the time, but then we kind of went so far to the other extreme, and then we started to lack athleticism in certain parts as well. So I think all of these sort of things, it wasn't one thing, it was sort of an amalgamation that sort of started to gripe on players and fans alike as well. And I think some people, I think eventually just sort of lost faith in his vision, and none more so than Fabregas, who was the poster boy at the period as well. So it's a shame. And but yeah, unfortunately, I do feel some of the criticism was definitely justified, even if it was maybe at the times a bit over the top as well.
Don't you boys, sorry, just to butt in quickly, don't you boys think though that even after Fabregas and Nasri left, in a way, kind of sort of got a decent enough core of players back in, and he also referenced the Leicester season, and you guys, for me, one of the most critical summers where we really missed out was the summer where we just signed Chag on a free. That was ridiculous for me. So that was again a missed opportunity where I think we just needed a striker, maybe another centre midfielder, and we just got Chag on a free, which looked like a good signing, to be fair. And I think generally, if we would have had midfielder and striker and complete in this team, we would have very much competed with Leicester all the way through. So yeah, again,
I think these. Yeah, I hear you, but I think these are the issues, man. Some of the footballing decisions were not right when they could have been. There's no kind of, I don't think, looking back on it, even there's an obvious reason or good enough rationale for why he didn't take some of the footballing decisions where I feel he could have, and that was both in terms of dealings and the way he kind of managed the squad in terms of what came in and what came out, but also some of the actual footballing tactical decisions in games. And for me, like I'd always feel like the criticism is just if you go out and lose to Chelsea 5-0, if you go out and get slapped 6-1, if you like, Arsenal is a big football club, so losing game those heavy defeats really, man, have swiped some credibility from the club. Like, it's like trying to live down 8-2 is like there are teams who don't have the quality, who will never have the quality that Arsenal had, who just won't go out and lose 8-2. It's just not going to happen. So for me, it was about some of the decisions. And I know Arsene Wenger he is an idealist. He's a purist. He believes in playing the game a certain way. And, sometimes this was the price of playing expansive football. You leave yourself vulnerable and open at the back. But there were some times where we can all see the structural issues in terms of how he set the team out. But he wasn't reactive enough, or he wouldn't adapt them, or he wouldn't make substitutions quick enough, or to change games. Like it just felt like, what is going on here? So yeah, man, I do think it is harsh. There's so much sentiment attached to it because of who he is, but some of the criticism is just for me.
Oh, sorry. I thought Leroy was going to talk. Never mind. I've got quite a lot of listeners' questions here. I think unfortunately, a lot of the listeners thought they would actually going to be able to put the questions to Jeremy, but yeah, guys, we didn't mean to con you, but we'll answer your questions for you, innit? So we'll answer the questions for you. So let me start from. We've got fucking loads, so let me try and pick out some of the better ones. Okay, so I'll start from our Discord server actually, because we're giving priority to those on our Discord to get to ask listeners questions. Sorry, so 24_K_G. He says, what has been Arsene's biggest regret in his 20+ years at Arsenal? Any takers? I think it's got to be for me, like those missed signings that were gonna take us to the next level, like those seasons where we were just like one player short. It has to be those, because one league title in one of those seasons really changes everything. The way he's looked at, the way maybe our future. They have to be seen as really, really big regrets.
It might, but I think these are the ones that I know about and are publicised. But it's got to be one of the three that have already been mentioned. So, well, we didn't mention Cristiano Ronaldo, but not signing him.
That's true. I think that was before Jeremy's.
Jeremy's but that could have been that was the difference of $500,000. So obviously, looking back in hindsight, it's easy to say, should have signed him. It's a no-brainer. But at the time, obviously, he was an unknown team. Suarez, I think Suarez is probably the one that we felt like that would have been, without a shadow of a doubt, a transformative signing for us, man. Even with the deficiencies that we had at the back in our side, he would have made such a difference for us, man. He would have made such a difference for us. So I think he's one. And maybe, again, like maybe Xabi Alonso might have been a regret, or it's difficult to answer. But I think, again, the type of player that we just missed out on.
I think if you ask Wenger this question, he probably wouldn't even say signings, I think he'd say about players that left, and if you could have kept them on, something along those lines.
Who do you think? Which player do you think he would have referred to?
It probably would have been Van Persie or Fabregas. I mean, they were very. I think they were crucial to wherever we going. And really, as a franchise, I've been playing a lot of NBA 2K lately, yeah. But as a franchise player, I mean, Fabregas was a poster boy. So he's the one that's come through the academy. He kind of stood for what Arsenal are trying to do. Of course, we're trying to bring people through the academy, but we're also looking to buy the best young talent and then developing them. And he really was the absolute poster boy. And I think it probably would be something around Fabregas or Van Persie.
I also think for me, just harping back to that 07-08 season as well, because that team was fantastic. It was generally fantastic. You have to remember that team was, until that Eduardo injury, we were like, 10 points, 12 points clear at the top of the table in February. And you have to remember, Man United at these times had an elite team. That was the time they had Ronaldo, Rooney and Tevez up front. Chelsea had a fantastic team as well. Do you know what I mean? So, and those were the teams that got to the Champions League final that season. And yet they were 10, 12 points behind Arsenal at one stage. Do you know what I mean? So, and it was after that Eduardo leg break that we completely collapsed. Do you know what I mean? So, but Arsenal were toe-to-toe levels with all of those teams that season. Do you know what I mean? So, I think certain parts of that season were maybe mishandled, because obviously we had Flamini, he was playing centre mid and he was doing a very good job that season, but his contract ran out at the end of the season, and he left on a free to go to AC Milan. We had bought Lassana Diarra at the start of that season from Chelsea, and obviously he was probably thinking that he's going to be a starter. And I think because of the Euros being the end of the season, he thought he was going to play loads. He didn't play, and he left in January.
Yeah, that was weird, wasn't it? Yeah, that was really strange.
So we had him for like 6 months. And then obviously we still had Gilberto Silva at that time. So he was probably feeling marginalised as well. So we had sort of 3 defensive midfielders who all by the end of the season, they all left. So
Gilberto was feeling like Kanye West.
Lassana Diarra must be the best player we've ever had that barely played for us.
Yeah,
like
so-
it's really
Well,
that was a. Huh?
He ended up being at Madrid.
He went to Real Madrid. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
He did well for Portsmouth, and then Real Madrid bought him. So, but you got to remember, so that season we were quite, as a team, that was probably one of the last, that and the 2010-11 teams where we had very, very good balance. Do you know what I mean? So imagine that season, we went from having 3 defensive midfielders. The start of the next season, we didn't have a single one. We had the Nilsson being sent over. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah, balance.
I do think in terms of regret, I'm just trying to think like where this, where our dominance really ended was the 04 after we'd won our last league title, really. And I'm just wondering, the way he got rid of Vieira, like I think even Vieira was like really surprised to be sold. There was constant links away with Vieira before he was sold, and then 1 year out of the blue, it was like, oh, we've accepted a bid from Inter Milan, you're off. And then the next year it's like Ashley Cole has left. And I really think that's the catalyst for, allowing your big players to leave the club, because we didn't do that before. I'm trying to think like during like the early years of Wenger, when was we letting big players go? I know he let like Ian Wright go, but at the time we had, Anelka, we had Dennis Bergkamp at the time.
Well, we let Anelka go.
We let Anelka go, but that was kind of like I guess that was maybe, we did let Anelka go, but that was kind of like for stupid money at the time, where it was hard to say no. But Vieira, how much we sell Vieira for?
Yeah, that was crazy, man. That was
Ashley
crazy.
Cole for 5 million plus Gallas. Like, these deals didn't even make sense to me.
They were crazy deals, man. They were crazy. And that's the thing about Arsenal as well. I always feel like because of our poor handling of player contracts and player situations, we don't ever get the right market value for our players, and that carries on till today with all the talk, whether it's true or not, but the talk about Aubameyang, even the situation that we've got into with Oba, and it's kind of like, come on, man, like 20 million, like, come on, man. It might not be true, but that's the talk. I mean, you just got to say, come on, man, what is actually going on at this club in terms of who handles and manages the player comings and goings, and we need to change that, man. We need to.
Adil asked, it was a question that I put to Jeremy actually, and he asked like, how much did the cost incurred by the Emirates move hinder Wenger's ability to financially compete, with the other elite clubs at the time? Jeremy kind of had the thing, that it definitely did hamstring us, but obviously we're still in a privileged position where, over most clubs, and, and I think even when we have spent money, it's been misspent for a lot of the part under Wenger. Our squad is still littered with players that Wenger, used the resources poorly with, really.
And the wages have been quite a part of that as well, not just the transfer fees. Wenger always had this thing about saying like he wanted parity in terms of what players across the squad were paid. So that obviously impacts when you're paying players like Bentner 35k, 50k, 60 plus k a week at the time. Don't sound like a lot today, but at the time. It just, it's not really what they deserve, in my opinion. But also, it makes them harder to offload as well. And that's again, it's another issue that we see today. Like, these are the legacy bits, like with players like Mickey and Mustafi, and just their wages are high, aren't they? So other clubs don't want to take them on.
Do you know what the thing is with me with Arsenal is? I think clubs always make mistakes. So you'll always have players like someone like a Bentner on too much money. Any club has this type of problem, but we've made too many mistakes and too many errors of the same, and this is very impactful on the club moving forward. So you might have Chelsea having a disproportionate wage bill. This is just hypothetical, by the way. So, but they are good at selling players, or they're good at buying players. So we were not really good at buying players for value, and we didn't really have the spending power. And then we were terrible at selling players, like actually terrible at selling players. then we also didn't have the wage bill to really get more players in and pay them a lot. And then we also had a wage bill that I don't know, it's just too many. I can't really think of many more, but if you get what I mean, it's like it was just too many points, and we didn't really have any outstanding bits in the transfer market. I think the only thing that we had was his pulling power. His pulling power was enormous, to be fair. We just weren't able to utilize it often enough and well enough, and that is a failure. That is probably not just on Wenger. That's gonna have to be.
And it was offset by our other failings as a club. Like the pulling power was never enough because we were doing things so poorly in other areas that it just kind of like took away from that fact. Tommy Ajayi asks, Arsene Wenger has been known for his gems in the rough, but what player do you think was his underrated find? That's quite an interesting question. I don't think we've ever. I know we've covered
Good question.
It is a good question because we talk about players who obviously who Wenger has turned into like superstars. But what about those underrated players that Wenger has found? Do any names spring to mind? I'm thinking like maybe Gilberto, but was Gilberto a gem? He was a World Cup winner when he signed. I don't know if that counts. Hleb, maybe?
Kolo Touré was probably a gem at that time.
Kolo Touré, yeah, straight, yeah.
And he was very, very cheap as well.
Yeah. I was talking to Ed Aarons yesterday, actually, and on his Wikipedia, it says that we got Kolo Touré straight from Ivory Coast, but I seem to remember him playing in Belgium.
Yeah, I'm sure he was playing in Belgium. I'm sure. Wasn't he at
Beveren?
Beveren, yeah.
The Kolo Touré thing and Eboué as well. I think that there was some story about them players being in the academy in Ivory Coast, and they would always go to this Belgium team, and there was like some rumors of we shouldn't have that was like illegal business we did apparently.
Yeah,
really.
So
what you're saying is we took it from Wikipedia. We've removed it. There are times that Beveren never existed, basically.
Yeah. I think now it's a bit legalized. Other clubs do it, that you have like an academy that you sponsor in that country, and then you bring the players in. But I don't think we owned that academy. But yeah, I think Kolo Touré is a very good shout. For me, Koscielny, amazing signing.
Yeah, I was going to say Koscielny because like I was vexed when we signed Koscielny.
And then he got sent off in the first game, wasn't it?
I was like, who the hell is this guy, man? Like, another one?
Long hair as well. His hair was so bad.
Yeah, he weren't even playing in like one of the top teams in France. I was like, come on,
he must have been like, because we got him from League Two, right? He came from was it Troyes or Tours or was
Lorient?
Lorient, sorry.
Yeah,
Lorient,
from Lorient, yeah.
And they were never a top French sides, I don't think. And that must have been one of the first signings actually from the French second tier. Yeah. That I don't really remember too many Premier League signings from the French tier, but that's a really good shout.
Even more obvious ones like Patrick Vieira was a gem. He cost 3.5 million in any era. That is good. Like even Robert Pires cost £6 million. That's
an Elka 500k.
His early dealings, he was
our early dealings, but like, and that's probably another thing that upsets people because the first 10 years, 11, 12 years,
we were cheating, really, weren't we?
We were the value we got for the money we spent was outrageous.
Yeah,
outrageous.
Wenger had the cheat code from 96 to like 03, 02. He had the cheat code for
he had the cheat code.
It was the Reyes deal when he tried to go big with the Reyes deal,
and he was under so much pressure to do something. Like the Jeffers deal as well. Very uncharacteristic.
That Jeffers deal was bad. I think you'll know at the time. My fox in the box, but
yeah, he bought in. Yeah. I do wonder whether deals like that has made him more stubborn because he's like he kind of went with the all right, cool. I'll listen to you guys, and then it's like, well, I've done what you fucking asked me to, and they both were Reyes was okay, but Jeffers was awful. And I wonder if that makes you more stubborn as a coach, where you're like, you know what, fuck off. I'm not going to listen to you prats anymore. I listened to you twice before, and it's bit me in the arse. And now,
just for another one, Emmanuel Petit only cost 2.5 million as well. So that was another cheat code. And I think in Vieira's documentary, he said that was out of all the partners he had at Arsenal, he chose Petit above Gilberto and Edu as well. So, and that's not a surprise.
Overmars, we talked about Overmars.
Overmars was fantastic value.
How much? I mean, I imagine how much Overmars must have cost. Probably fucking nothing.
And he was like one of those originals back then. Like he had pace to burn. He was both footed. He panned goals. Like, and then like I remember when we sold, I was very upset because I was these times I still remembered. I was upset when we sold him and Overmars to Barcelona, and I was like, how are we going to replace? But then obviously we got Perez. We got Perez, and it was
We got him for 6 million. I'm surprised. I thought it'd be less than that, 6 million. But yeah,
because you could really go through the transfer windows that we in his early years and just pick so many gems. But the recent ones, I think Monreal was a really, really good deal as well.
That was good.
We got service out of Monreal, didn't we?
Yeah. He got years, and he was always consistent and reliable with.
Cazorla, of course. Cazorla was mad cheap.
Cazorla was because Malaga were having financial problems.
Financial issues.
Kleb, I think Kleb was quite a good one. You know,
how much was Kleb? He
like 8 million, was it? 12, 10 million, maybe.
About 10. Well, after my memory, I think he was 10, but I might be wrong. Don't quote me on that. But in that region,
I'm just looking through some of the deals now. Definitely not Lucas Perez. Some of these deals are awful, man. Cazorla was 17 million. Nacho Monreal was 9 million. Arteta for 10. Mertesacker 10.
There was decent money because we had 5. He was there for like him and Mertesacker were for like 5-6 years, so we definitely got value out of them as well.
Yeah, Koscielny 11 million. Nasri 14 and Ramsey 5 million, decent deal.
Good value.
Sagna 8 mil.
Oh, very, very good deal.
Riziki 9 million, Pleb 13 million, Alex Song 3 million. Van Persie. Oh God, how have we not mentioned Van Persie?
Van Persie was cheap. He was like 3 million, in it.
4 million. Van Persie. My God, we paid more for Emmanuel Munir that summer than we did for Van Persie.
Jesus Christ. That is nuts.
But let me move on to the next question then. Okay, man like K _ asked, why was the Invincibles team broken up so quickly when moving to the Emirates?
I think partly financials, but Vieira was. When we talk about Vieira, I think Vieira had to go to make space for Fabregas because they were never going to coexist in the same team at that time, innit? Do you know what I mean? So because none of them were the defensive midfielder, do you know what I mean? So Vieira always had Gilberto, Edu, or Petit like behind him, innit? So and I think that was kind of validated because the next season when we played Juve in the Champions League, Fabregas played Vieira off the park, innit? Do you know what I mean? So as a teenager as well. So I think that one was okay. Who went that probably shouldn't have gone. Actually, Cole, we've already spoken about it. He shouldn't have gone. What happened with Sol Campbell?
So Campbell kind of like
he just went off the rails a bit.
He went off the rails. There was the West Ham game at half time where he left the stadium.
He went off the rails.
He was having issues with his dad at the time, though, wasn't he?
Yeah. He went off the rails a bit. Bergkamp was natural, but he was retiring.
He was retiring.
Perez
stayed for a couple more years, but he was getting older, though, isn't it? We remember with Perez, weren't we just?
No. Perez didn't go to the Emirates era. Remember
he left after the Champions League final.
After the Champions League final.
Yeah.
But wasn't that a contract thing where we was like, we refused to give him we kept giving him 1 year deals or something like that?
Maybe, but I also remember he was probably upset at being taken off in the Champions League final because we kept on like, there was others who maybe could have been taken off, but he was the one who was taken off in it. So I think at the time,
it was him or Ljungberg. One of them had to go,
and he was pissed.
And we took him off, and he plays on that left side. On
but you got to remember, Haleb was playing but Haleb was very, very good. Like, do you know what I mean? So
Haleb. Sorry.
Let me tell you the transfer business the season after the Invincibles, right? So 04-05. We obviously we saw. I keep forgetting Jeffers was part of. Did Jeffers get a fucking Premier League medal for that 03-04? All right, okay.
I respect that though.
So we lost Sylvain Wiltord. He went to Lyon on a free transfer. All of these are free transfers, by the way. Van Bronckhorst went to Barcelona somehow. What the hell? How did that happen on a free transfer? Ray Parler left on a free transfer. Carnu left to West Brom. Martin Keown went to Leicester. So that was all in the season straight after the Invincibles. And then the season after, we lost Edu. I think maybe
why did he go?
Edu, I don't know. He went back to Valencia. He
went to Valencia. Yeah, probably first team football, like guaranteed first team football.
Yeah, true.
That season we lost both Vieira and Edu.
Yeah, it was too much, man.
Yeah, and then the season after we Bergkamp went, Pires went, Campbell went, Ashley Cole went.
Christ,
even those 4 names alone,
Seagan went
already.
Lauren went.
See what I mean? Yeah,
within 3 years, we'd lost basically the whole team. Only Thierry Henry, Colo there still.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
And Gilberto, yeah. Lundberg still there. I think
Lundberg was still there for a bit,
but that was like old Lundberg.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Okay. All right, here's a nice one. This from Baitface Nate. Obviously, Nate comes from the podcast sometimes. He asked, was Wenger right to stay loyal to Arsenal? So we always talk about, us getting rid of Wenger. And
he didn't deserve it. Now, I'll be honest, we didn't deserve it, man. He should have cut when Real Madrid was trying to give him that check.
Yeah,
he could have easily cut as well. Like, imagine, put it this way: imagine in an alternative universe, like say after 2004, 2005, Wenger cuts. Everyone's crying their eyes out, bro, because we don't have a clue. We don't have a clue what's coming next in it. So, yeah. No,
I wonder if he wishes he did. Do you think there's any regrets on his behalf? We talk about what would Arsene Wenger's biggest regrets would be. Do you think one of them were to not leave Arsenal? And
because he had so many opportunities, he'd have done it. He had
so many opportunities, so many times.
Yeah, it wasn't just Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, Juve. I'm sure.
French national team as well.
It was every couple of years, man.
Isn't there a story about Man United coming for Wenger or something? Or have I completely made that up?
I think there was around that. I think there was something around that as well. But yeah, he had so many opportunities as well. He could have cut. And I think sometimes that's why some people do look at the abusers a bit too much. They're like, listen, obviously some of the criticisms are valid, but you man are going over the top. Do you know what I mean? This guy in his heyday, he could have cut for a different team. So, yeah, go on, bro.
No, I was going to just say, sorry, bro. I was going to say, I think if he goes Real Madrid, though, when they was on him heavy, if he went Real Madrid, I think he dusts down Europe. I think he proper dusts down Europe.
Yeah, actually,
if he got Real Madrid, they would have given him resource wouldn't have been an issue. He would have been able to get in who he wanted and just.
He already had the clout, man.
So, yeah, I think they just dust down Europe. To be fair,
actually, Lewis, you talk about biggest regrets for him is probably never winning the Champions League. Do you know what I mean? That to him is it's a massive regret. Do you know what I mean? So, and even if you think he even actually, because I remember when he's been asked loads of times, he even thinks back to 2006. They were like, we had so many, even though we were down to 10 men. Obviously, we hate talking about it, but Henry just converted one of those chances after we won we win the game. Do you know what I mean? And where we talk about we're European champions, and that's never. Do you know what I mean? So I think that one probably knowing what it is and knowing that, especially in the final, that it was Thierry who had all those chances, probably hurts him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So, yeah, no, 100%. Just coming away from Wenger, just a few contemporary issues to talk about before we wrap things up. So obviously it's been announced that Premier League is back, 17th of June. We're playing Man City at home. Brilliant.
Away.
Is it away? Sorry. Oh wow, it's away. Even worse. Right. Okay. I tried to make a a bad situation. Try to put a bit of shine on it, But yeah, thoughts on that, guys? Obviously, in my opinion, the Premier League was always inevitable to come back. The money factor. I've been rubbing it in your faces, obviously in the group chat, saying, I was right all along. This is my smug look on my face, so guys, I want you to take it in. All right, I want you guys to all look at me. All right. Yeah.
It's a shame Leroy is not on at the moment.
To be honest, I think Leroy changed his tune. He changed his tune just in time to be like, yeah, they're gonna bring it back. Is Leo really? I want to look in his eye. I want to look Leo in his eye.
But Leroy did say that the impact of COVID was not as big as people feared. So that kind of has a ripple effect, and then kind of allows the Premier League to come back. Because I think once it started, and lockdown was such an extreme measure that we never thought we'd experience in life. So we kind of thought coronavirus is going to stay for a much longer time. and there's no way the Premier League could come back in time. And then somehow we're here now, and it's coming back. So,
Yeah,
and obviously,
in quick fashion.
Obviously, we're getting pammed. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who was it that said we're confident? I think a couple of them in the group.
Shabs.
Shabs, the ever optimist.
Was it Shabs?
You're saying that? What are you accusing me of now today? saying that what I didn't. Saying what I said. No, we're not.
I love your
back.
T-shirt, by the way, Shabs. It's very very trendy.
It's different, man. It's different, you know. No football shirt.
Yeah. How are you guys feeling? Like, I've been, kind of watching some of the training videos, trying to, get back the what's to be excited about, really. But yeah, but how do you guys feel it's gonna go? Are we? Say that again.
No, I was going to say, did you not see Martinelli? Did you see him dust down Lacazette?
I'm seeing Lacazette looking trim.
No, explain what happened. I haven't seen it.
Lacazette's looking cut up, but
still slow.
Yeah, well, all I see is like, what's his name? Martinelli was off the ball. Laka was on the ball, just doing bare bits, and Martinelli just comes from off screen and just charges him, just gets the ball. I just thought, that guy's
hungry, man.
That's what we need from you. He's going to bed. He's got some, he's got some biceps going. I'm
Coronavirus don't scare Martinelli, boy.
I hope he comes hungry.
I got every day, man.
I hope he comes back hungry. I think injuries have to be a legitimate consideration, man. And I think if I look to Germany, especially with Haaland, I'm not sure how serious his injury is, but obviously they've had that period of time with no football. They also had a winter break, so further complicates things. We had a winter break, didn't we? We just had ours much later for the first time ever. So it's been stop-start, really, so from December, January, and they've played a couple games, and
they played 4 or 5 games already, haven't they? It's crazy, man.
And that's what it is, man. It's trying to schedule all the scheduling and the timetabling of matches in a short space of time to finish it within the time frame is something that worries me. Obviously, having players back from injury is a positive thing.
Who's back? Tierney back?
I think
everyone's fit.
Everyone apart from Callum Chambers is all right.
Yeah. I don't think we've got any major casualties.
Because do you remember Torreira had that injury and they said he was going to be out for like 3 months, but obviously time's gone and he's back now. So.
Hey, listen, fuck Torreira, man. That guy's still talking shit in the press, bro. I think we're gonna have to sell that guy because he's talking shit.
As long as the bag is nice, I'm on it, man.
Listen, yeah, but I don't think we're gonna get. This is the thing. Post-corona transfer values is not worth selling anyone, man. It's just like. We're not going to get any.
I don't know, man. Like I told you, I'm probably deluded, but I don't know why something inside me just says we're going to get party. I don't know. I just feel confident that it's going to happen. Normally, I don't even feel confident about these sorts of things, but I don't know. There's never smoke.
It's the noise, isn't it? It's the right noise.
It's the noise, but also you got to remember that he wanted to come last summer, innit? But they said they prioritised spending the money on a forward, innit? So
would you swap Torreira for Partey?
Oh,
yeah,
easily.
100%,
We're not even
100%,
thinking about it twice.
Of course.
But I don't think Atletico would take Torreira. That's not the style. But Simeone likes more robust players, isn't it? Yeah. And I don't think Torreira suits that profile.
Torreira's robust, man. They got
he is. But he's a little Uruguayan boy, isn't he?
To be honest, the noise is still around Lacazette as well, being involved maybe in a swap deal. I've seen Inter linked with him as well, so you never know. You never know what could happen. So, but
I like a guy, man. You're getting 6-pack to move.
Hairline is fading though. Crazy.
Listen, I know all about it, boy. I know all about it. But all right, lads. We'll leave it there. I think we've done enough. We've given the people as much as they deserve. So yeah, we'll be back next Wednesday. I can't promise any special guests next Wednesday, guys. So but we'll see. We'll keep you updated. But Dan, Shabs, Seun, lovely having you, and obviously thanks to Jeremy as well, Jeremy Wilson, for coming on. And we'll be back next week. Remember to follow us at Touchy Gooners.
Bless.
Thanks.
Peace.
When I spit bars in a rave, man, I go hard like Santan.